Hello, how mysterious. Oh, hello, hello. And
Hi, Jess.
Ramon, what a surprise. What an
Right?
absolute shock to see you here. And hello to everybody joining us. What virtually is the only choice this day and age.
I'd love to take a moment and look at where folks are tuning in from. We got folks tuning in from Austria,
Oh yeah, where are you all
Paraguay,
based? Oh gosh.
Sweden.
Oh, a cold Sweden though.
Ooh.
So, yeah, if it's not a bother, and I know we'll have a little tiny delay, Cape Cod. What an exciting near fictional sounding place. Are there indeed many cod? We've got Matthews in Chicago. I bet you're cold too, my love. Sorry, I'm terribly overly familiar.
You're fine, Jess.
Ahmad, you're in Syria. I hope you're doing okay, and I hope it's warm there. We've got, hang on, I'm gonna go very, very fast like the old Animaniac skit. I'm not. Got sunny Denver, Germany again, but Dortmund specifically, which is I
Ooh.
think is very hip. New Jersey, Brazil. Oh, Jacob, I lived in North Carolina for ages. I hope you're doing all right out there. I hope you get some cookout, yeah? India, Vegas, Hungary. Dave, you're just up the way in Scotland. I know you're going to be cold this week. Ottawa, India. Kiri, is that the Kiri? Is that the Kiri? So, one of the nicest things about the Bad Website Club, which I'm very excited to chat about, is have y'all seen how cute the art is?
I'm flabbergasted. It's beautiful and it's Curie's incredible work. Thank
Kiri
you.
did all of the cute art. Kiri did anytime you think, "Oh, wow, they look really cool and like they've got it all together," it's all Kiri's fault. Credit, credit. So while I would joyously list all these cool people who are based everywhere, I think we should probably go ahead and chat about Ramon, what's the Bad Website Club? What are we doing? Just
Yeah.
here, not like in life. That's not your purview.
That might take up a bit of a stream. Um, yeah, let's talk about the Bad Website Club. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this sort of launch party of this new experiment, this new journey, this new learning process we want to try with all of you. Um,
Because I
the
remember
bad,
you saying the thing about learning to build stuff for the web is you have to be absolutely perfect every single time. The more pressure you pile on top of it, the better you're going to learn. Is that true and accurate?
well, not exactly. Not
Maybe the
exactly.
opposite.
Yeah, kind of like really not. Kind of like really not. So and two things sort of happened. We if you know us from the boot camps that the free boot camps we've been running in collaboration with the incredible folks at Class Central and Free Code Camp, what we've been trying to do is to do our bit in making this knowledge more accessible, more friendly, more easygoing for all of you. And on top of that, what happens in between? What are the knowledge gaps that are missing? What are the learning and really sort of drive home this sort of joy from learning, this sort of ongoing learning experience? We want to be there with all of you. So we thought, let's make this an ongoing thing. And that's where the Bad Website Club came from.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna toss a URL into all of the chats. Go and check it out. Don't judge us too much. It's not a great website.
But it would be a bit weird if we had a good website for the Bad Website Club, right?
Well, yeah. So what we're trying to do is sort of we want to bring in experts. So here's what we have in mind. On
Here's
Mondays,
the pitch, the pitch.
the
Oh,
pitch.
every
Yeah,
Monday. Almost every Monday. We're taking breaks, right?
we are absolutely taking breaks because
Cool,
one
cool.
big part of that is resting, letting that knowledge sink in and all of that. So the pitch is we'll have these seasons of learning. Mondays, we bring in an expert to give us a demo. We're going to have somebody come in and show us, hey, here's how this tool, this platform works. They're going to give us a really cool expert demo. And then the next day, Jess and I, or maybe one of us, are going to
Could be
hop on
one of us
screen.
sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're
And
lucky, Ramon. If you're not,
Jess, please, if
hey,
anything.
exactly.
So the idea is Monday we have an expert show us. Tuesday we go and play with it.
We'll just try and do the thing. It's fine.
Yeah. So this is going to be going on for seasons. So what we're kicking off this week is going to be the no code season. Can we share with
Because,
folks
like,
who we're having join us, Jess?
I think we can. If you can get up the list. I cannot remember what happened 10 minutes ago. So I definitely know who's next Monday. But while you're doing that, the whole idea of having no code was really great feedback we got from doing the boot camps. So we had a ton of folks who were amazing, and they said, "Hey, I really need a website because I want to have a shop or I want to have a blog or I've got some very, very pointy opinions about gardening. So I want a website. I don't necessarily want to be a web developer though." And we thought, oh, cool, cool, cool. What if we do a season of website builders to say, hey, here is probably the fastest possible way to say, let's make a website. So next Monday, a little bit later, so about an hour later than this is starting, we're going to have the nice people at Wix who
That's
they're a
correct.
website builder. It's free. Oh, God, that's the big thing. The Bad Website Club, just like the boot camps, is always, always, always going to be free. There is no way to pay us. If anybody tries to say, hey, I'm Jess, give me $50, either something terrible has happened or much more likely that's not me.
Exactly. So the point is to keep this free. The point is to keep this consistent, and the point is to keep this, fun and easygoing and collaborative. Where it's going to be Jess and I most of the time here on stream, but we're learning with all of you. So please feel free. We're gonna get some more community stuff going soonly after as well. Now, so yeah, we're gonna have Wix next week. Week after, we're gonna have the kind folks from Automatic who work on WordPress to give us a demo of WordPress so that we can play around with it. The week after that, we're going to be playing around with the folks from Ghost, and they're going to show us how that works. It's going to be a
And I
lot of
confess
fun.
that's a selfish one. I've been wanting to redo my website and I really wanted to add Ghost.
So yeah, we're going to be having all of these folks come in, and then the next day we're going to, just play around with it and see what we can make. And we invite all of you to join us as well. Send us what you're working on. We're going to be showing a little bit of more of that, how that's going to work shortly. But here's a question, Jess. Does that mean the boot camps are done?
No, no, that wouldn't be fair. We get all these really fantastic learners, and really, we'll have Mr. Shah later come up, and I wanted to say again, like getting Free Code Camp and Class Central coming in and saying, "Hey, we want to help you build these boot camps," was one of the most exciting things I've gotten to do professionally. But we're definitely still going to do boot camps. A big part of why we want to do the Bad Website Club is talking to the learners. A lot of you are like, this has to be perfect. It's not ready to show people. So we wanted to like bully you, softly bully you, gently encourage you.
I like that.
To really ease up that it's okay if stuff's messy and it's okay if stuff's bad. It's 2023. Everything's messy and bad. And to that, in just a second, we're going to have somebody giving a nice condensed version of one of the best talks I've ever seen in tech. No pressure. But we're
Yes,
definitely still going to do the boot camps, just interspersed with pastel colored goofiness.
exactly. The point is to keep the fun going, is to keep it interactive, to keep it like the big focus here is collaboration as well. So we'll be showing a little bit later how it is that y'all can join in the conversation and like show what you're working on, show what it is that you're making, and sort of like encourage each other. Because I think the big thing we want to promote here is that notion of like, getting it out there, showing it to folks, getting that euphoric joy of putting it out there and having folks respond to what you're working on it's incredible and keeps us going. So, shall we talk a little bit about what's going on today? This is the launch party, and you might have seen either on social media or on newsletters that we're going to have a couple of guests join us today. First, we're going to have a lightning talk, and then we're going to have a panel discussion. And for both of these folks, these are meant to be interactive. So we're live streaming. Please.
This is live?
This is live.
That's right.
I should have mentioned that, Jess. Sorry.
Everything's fine.
um, yeah, so please bring your questions, bring your bring your comments, brings your experiences. We want to learn from you as well.
So we're going to be starting with a lightning talk. So a nice, tight, really exciting talk by Jo Franchetti. And introducing Fro, introducing Jo is actually really challenging because Jo's good at everything. Hmm.
Shall we bring her in?
Oh yeah, let's
And
let her introduce herself because otherwise I was going to start listing. She did this IoT project. It was fun. Oh, with this one time, and it would just be embarrassing. And some of our speakers are up very, very late in their time zones. So what if I go ahead and banish myself and replace me with really a much better replacement, Jo? Jo, would it be terribly rude to ask you to introduce yourself?
No, not rude at all. Hey everybody, I'm Jo Franchetti. I am a developer advocate at Spotify, and I mostly do web-focused things, but as just mentioned, I do also love dabbling in IoT and hardware stuff. And I also have been on a big journey throughout my tech career. So I think I started in tech over 10 years ago now, which, is a little embarrassing to admit. And I went from being a front end web developer to getting into dev advocacy. And I'm sure many of you here have gone through the same thing. Your mental health goes in, waves as you're making your way through your career. And one of the things that I have really found has affected me a lot, and one of the things that I think is such a perfect thing to talk about at the Bad Website Club is perfectionism. So I'm going to give a little talk to you today about perfectionism and about how it can affect the way that you work. It can affect your mental health. It can affect your physical health as well. So I'm going to ask the team if you can bring my slides up. Thank you so much. Look at that. So profesh. Okay, awesome. So this is me. As I mentioned, I'm Jo Franchetti. You can get me at This Is Jo Frank on Twitter. My DMs are open. You can also get me on LinkedIn at Jo Franchetti. If you want to talk to me about any of the things that I mentioned today, I'm always happy to chat. Also, of course, you have your brilliant mentors, Jess and Ramon, who are also, absolute experts in this area as well. So please do reach out and have a chat to us. And of course, we're going to have the panel discussion afterwards where we can talk about these things as well. So let's talk about perfectionism. When I was preparing for my first ever tech interview, I was given a piece of advice that I'm pretty certain a lot of you have all heard as well. And it was this: if an interviewer ever asks you what your weaknesses are, just tell them that you're a perfectionist. And this particular piece of advice was given to me and countless other people by my boss in my job at the time. And it's the kind of statement that makes everyone roll their eyes. Interviewers and interviewees alike know that it's supposed to be a cop-out answer. The idea is that you're not really actually revealing any weakness because the employer wants to hire a perfectionist, because we all know that perfectionists do great work, right? They do the best work, they do perfect work. And it never really occurred to me at the time, as I kind of naively accepted this older and more experienced man's instruction, that I'd grow to learn the real truth behind this statement. So if we look it up on Wikipedia, it says that perfectionism in psychology is a personality trait characterized by a person striving for flawlessness and setting high performance standards, accompanied by critical self-evaluation and concerns regarding others' evaluations. Which, if I was an employer, honestly, I think that kind of sounds great. Like, I'd want to hire someone who strives for flawlessness, who sets high standards, and cares about others' evaluations. They sound like a real achiever. But the problem is that perfectionism can often actually be a blocker to achievement. Imagine that you're constantly aiming for perfection. So we're not talking greatness, we're not talking excellence, we're talking real perfection. You can't help but set yourself up to fail. Achieving perfection is really just, it doesn't happen very often. Not many people achieve perfection. But the problem starts to rear its head when we think about the fact that perfectionists measure our own self-worth by how able we are to achieve this perfection, by how much we can accomplish. And if we don't achieve these sort of lofty goals and accomplishments that we set for ourselves, we can often be very harsh on ourselves. And the trouble is that for perfectionists, our performance is intertwined with our sense of self. And when we don't succeed, we don't just feel disappointed in how we did, we feel disappointment in who we are as a person. And this deep shame can manifest in many insidious and unpleasant ways. So perfectionists often engage in something called catastrophic thinking or black and white thinking, where everything is either perfect or it's terrible. And even things that most people would call great or good enough fall into the terrible category. So let's give an example. A fear of putting up your new website because you think someone might find an error on it, or they might not think that it's the best website that they've ever seen. And the idea of somebody thinking that you might not be completely perfect at making a website becomes this end of world scenario, something that would be absolutely devastating for you to live through, rather than something that's actually quite manageable and that could be worked through if and when, it ever happens. And I say the word diagnosed, I was diagnosed as a perfectionist by my therapist a few years ago. And it was actually for me a relief to finally have a name to put to the stress that I was feeling. Every time I made a mistake or I had a mental block on a piece of work, I had a tendency to spiral into depression and this kind of decision paralysis. I couldn't get started on work because I knew that if I started, it wouldn't be perfect. And so I never got started or I never finished anything. And then it made my mental block worse and it made my disgust with myself greater. I had this nasty little voice in my head telling me that I wasn't good enough, that everybody knew I was a hack and not a competent developer, that everybody else around me was better than me, and that if I ever put anything out there, everyone was instantly going to tell me it was terrible. I used to convince myself that everyone was judging me and finding me lacking. And I could push myself into anxiety, into stress, into panic, all without ever receiving any actual external judgment. It was just all coming from this mean little voice in my head. And one time, the anxiety that I felt over a failure to create a perfect piece of work was so bad that it manifested in neck cramps. And I had this crippling neck pain and couldn't move. And doctors eventually had to put me on Valium to force me to relax and actually take time out. And this is the real problem with perfectionism. Not only does it cause stress on your mind and on your brain, but it can put stress on your body as well. And you can sometimes feel it manifest in a headache or racing heart or sweaty palms, or dry mouth, aching muscles, all kinds of super fun side effects. And the tech industry and capitalism and our society as a whole actually really love it when we strive for perfection. They want us to be building more things, building better things, being faster, being the most successful so that we can earn the most money, so that we can spend it on becoming even better. And tech employers often encourage this unhealthy belief that we should constantly be striving to work harder, to create more, to learn everything, as if it was even possible for us to learn everything, as if it was even possible for us to be the best at our particular piece of technology. And the idea of needing to be successful and to earn a profit is drilled into us from a really early age. I mean, I know we have a lot of people from all around the world here, but when I was 11 years old, I was made to go to a tutor to do exams so that I could get into the right school. And if I didn't get into the right school, then, suddenly my entire career was already ruined at 11 years old. We're led to believe that we have to have the right job straight away after education, and perfectionist employees often pressure themselves into overwork, into tiredness, into depression and paralysis and burnout, all while continuing to turn in absolutely excellent work, because they're so afraid that if they stop, that someone will know that they're not perfect. If they ever ask for help, then someone will know that they're not perfect. And the other problem is that perfectionists have a tendency to disregard their own accomplishments because they don't feel like they're good enough. So as soon as they achieve something, they instantly disregard it because they've achieved it. So it can't possibly be perfect. It can't possibly bring that perfect feeling that they were hoping for. So they immediately start working towards the next thing and the next thing. And it's an unsustainable and unhappy way to be. And it can very quickly lead to burnout and overwork, which really can be very bad for not only your brain, but also your body physically. So if you're not sure if you've ever had perfectionist tendencies, and I see there's a few people in the chat who are fessing up that they have, but I'd like to ask you a few questions to consider. And this is the one that got me. So this is what my therapist asked me. She said, would you consider yourself a perfectionist? And my answer to her, which I'm sure all of you will laugh at, was, oh, no, there's no way. I'm not good enough to be a perfectionist. And she just kind of looked at me like, yeah, I've got some news for you. And I was like, oh, oops. So yeah, if you ever feel like that you're not good enough to be a perfectionist, then yeah, I'm sorry. This is another one. Have you ever felt like you can't start a project because you can't decide how to start on it? But figuring out the perfect way to start can even be a blocker to actually getting started. You know, once you get started, you've chosen a route, and that might not be the perfect route, so better not to start at all. Or how about this one? Have you ever left a project unfinished because you couldn't get it exactly how you wanted it? Especially personal websites is a really difficult one. It feels not exactly perfect. It's not exactly finished. You can keep adding bits, you can keep tweaking bits, but you're not quite ready to actually show it to anybody yet or ask anyone's opinion on it. Or have you ever worried about a project and put it off and delayed it until the last second, right up until the deadline, when you've finally been forced to actually output something and you've done it all in one night, and then everybody actually thought the work that you did was great and you feel surprised and maybe a little bit silly at how much you stressed about it and it was all fine in the end? Have you ever felt ashamed or afraid of asking for help from a colleague or a peer because that might show that there's something that you don't know, and or that there's something that you can't manage? And perfect people know everything and they never need to ask for help, so it's much better that you just try that 1000th search on Google rather than turning to the person next to you and asking them for help. Procrastination is a huge one. So if you've ever found yourself repeatedly scrolling through social media or watching reruns on Netflix, or even like I have a tendency to just get up and tidy my house when I know that I should be getting down and doing some work. And there are two sides to this question. So perfectionists have a tendency to procrastinate when they don't know how to start or finish a project. As I mentioned, not working on the project means it can't ever not be perfect because it'll never be finished. But the other side of that, and this happens with capitalism as well, is that it wants us to be constantly working and constantly improving. And when we're not working, we feel like we should be. And that by allowing ourselves that downtime, we're actually being lazy. And what we're calling procrastination is actually resting. It's the kind of feeling that makes us check our work emails at night or first thing when we wake up. And it makes us want to be always present on things like Slack and social media. And it makes you feel like you need to prove your dedication and one up all of your colleagues to prove that you're the best and the most perfect employee. But it's really important that you differentiate between procrastination and rest, and that you allow yourself some actual downtime, time when you're not thinking about work and when you're not making yourself feel guilty about not working. So, what can we do, both as perfectionists and friends of perfectionists, to make the tech industry a safer and a nicer place? So, the first thing that you really have to do is to allow yourself time. If you do find yourself procrastinating, or you find it difficult to get started on a project, or you just can't tackle a problem, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to get started. It just means that you can't do it right now. So give yourself some time and don't let feelings of guilt or shame take over you. Don't let that mean voice tell you that you're bad or wrong for doing this. Take a half an hour walk, or even take a whole day or an afternoon away from the problem, but schedule in a start time when you're going to try again in future. Set goals and deadlines and targets and schedules for yourself, but make sure that they're realistic. And if you have problems setting them for yourself, maybe ask someone to help you set them. This idea of a blank canvas or too much freedom can be very stifling to perfectionists. We need something that we can aim at and then improve upon. And given a blank canvas, we have a tendency to panic or procrastinate, or we'll start and then abandon multiple projects. So try and set yourself achievable goals. You write to-do lists, give yourself reminders in your calendar, allow yourself to strive for excellence while removing the paralyzing nature of the open-ended task. And then another thing that I particularly find useful is having an accountability buddy. So tell someone about the goals and deadlines that you've set for yourself. Telling someone makes it feel more concrete in your head. It's much easier to range on a promise to yourself than it is to range on a promise that you've told somebody else about. So, check in with a friend or a colleague and say, I was planning on doing this thing today. I'm going to get it done by 3 o'clock. Can I drop you an email at 3 o'clock to tell you how far I got? And, they don't even have to reply. It just means that you have someone to tell about it, someone to make that goal more concrete. This is the one that I find the most difficult, remembering that perfect is the enemy of great. Perfectionism isn't about high standards, it's about unrealistic standards. How many projects have you thrown away because you couldn't get them perfect, or because you were worried that others would judge them? Perfectly good work that you've spent hours and hours on never sees the light of day because you were too afraid to show it to somebody. Getting something out is better than abandoning all of your hard work. And I'd say 99.9% of the time, you will be surprised that not only will nobody else notice the imperfections that you think are so glaring, they'll actually think that your work is great. And, even if they think that your work is good enough, that's literally good enough. And acknowledge that you are your own most harsh critic. Most of the people out there are way too self-involved to even think about criticizing you. And most people don't expect perfection, from other people. Perfectionists only think that they do. No one's going to judge you as harshly as you judge yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody does it. It's okay to release imperfect code. It's okay to put a bad website out there on the internet. It's even okay if somebody finds a mistake in your website and tells you that they found it. It's not an end of world scenario. You can thank them, you can fix your problem, and you can learn from it, and you'll both move on with your lives. The world will not end. The internet will not think that you can't code. Everybody will have forgotten by tomorrow. It's easy to start putting yourself down when you don't meet your own unachievable standards, but try and consider instead how you'd react if somebody said the things that that little mean voice is saying to you, if somebody said that about one of your friends. How would you feel about what that mean voice was saying? And then the final thing, try and think your thoughts through to their logical conclusion. So instead of that kind of catastrophic or black and white thinking, like, oh my goodness, if somebody finds a mistake in my website, that would be, the end of my career. Consider what that would actually look like. So the worst possible outcome, you've put a website live and somebody's found a mistake in it. Are they likely to blast you all over the internet, or are they likely to just drop you a message and say, oh, hey, I found a mistake in your website? And you can say, oh, thanks for pointing that out. I'll change it now. And then you can push a change. And by tomorrow, they won't even remember that they found a mistake. Try and consider how an event will actually play out and how bad or not it would actually be. If you can work through your fears to their logical conclusion, it'll help you get out of that panic stage and back into a logical thinking place where life will continue, the end will not come. You get to fill a gap in your knowledge and save yourself hours of worrying. And the more I've spoken about my experiences with perfectionism, the more people have told me about their own similar problems. We are definitely not alone in this, with the tendency for intelligence and achievement in tech industry employees. It's perhaps unsurprising that so many people suffer from perfectionism. And the more we talk about it, the less stigma we're going to feel around dealing with it and around helping our friends and our colleagues to deal with it as well. You've got some absolutely brilliant mentors here in Jess and Ramon, and they have all both had their own experiences with perfectionism. Talk to them about it. Talk to your managers and your line managers if you're worried about how you're managing your time or your workload. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask the questions that you're worried are stupid. They're not. There really is no such thing as a stupid question. And everybody goes through rough patches sometimes. You don't have to downplay it. We can validate our own and each other's experiences by talking to each other and say, yeah, actually, this is hard. Like, this subject that we've chosen, web development, it's actually really difficult, and it's really cool that we're trying. And sometimes you have a bad day, that's okay. But the more open and communicative we are about mental health in the tech industry, the more pleasant a working experience we can make for everybody. And I really think that by talking about it, we can increase awareness about learning about mental health and physical health as well, because we all deserve to be happy and comfortable here, and we all deserve to put our bad websites out on the internet. Thank you so much for listening. This has been me. This is Jo Frank. You can get me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And yeah, let's talk about perfectionism.
Jo, thank you so much. That was just incredible. Could I use some of my powers that be, please, to invite everybody to please put some emojis into the chat and just say some wonderful things, because this was just incredible. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anybody else could relate, but there were so many times where I was just like, "Yep, that's me. Yep, that's yep." I felt like I felt like I was being called out. You know that? Do you know that? Do you know that meme from the Facebook reporting utility where it's like, I'm in this photo and I don't like it?
Yeah.
That's very much how I felt. That was wonderful. Thank you, Jo. Tell you what we're going to do, folks. Now is the time to start asking questions. Now is the time to start communicating, because we're going straight into our panel discussion. So I'm going to bring up everyone else. I'm going to bring up Dhawal Shah. How are you, Dhawal?
Hey, I'm good.
Thank you so much. Dhawal, could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
So I'm the founder of Class Central. It's a search engine for online courses. And it was a side project that I launched back in like over a Thanksgiving weekend in 2011. So it's just like over the long weekend, all my friends were American. They went back to their families. So I was doing just coding, trying to get a GitHub project. and yeah, just launched Class Central, over a weekend, put it out in a comment in Hacker News, and sort of I happened to be at the right place, right time. So yeah, now we have a catalog of like over 100,000 courses, uh, more than 60 million users since we started. So yeah, that's.
Thank you. I'm gonna highlight Dominica's comment here. Thank you so much for Class Central. I'm gonna be folks. I'm gonna be bookmarking questions. I'm just gonna bring up our third, last but not least guest. We've got Quincy Larson. How are you, Quincy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks. That was such a. I mean, it's gonna be tough to like come up with better guidance than Joe just dropped on us. It was amazing. Um, yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Absolutely. So first of all, usually I have a beard, but in China, like I'm in China right now, and that's why. Like if I seem really quiet, I'm trying not to wake up my kids. It's like midnight here. I just flew in like a few. If I seem slow to like respond or anything like that, it's just I'm jet lagging like crazy. But yeah, I'm Quincy. I teach at freecodecamp.org, and my goal is to just help as many people as possible have the confidence and the uh, easily accessible skills that they can pick up that so they can go out, get a job as a developer, and provide for their families, and have work that feels exciting, and where they can inject their creativity. Because I've worked like Taco Bell for a couple years, and there wasn't a lot of creativity, or there wasn't a lot of like control over your circumstance. Um, the manager says, "Hey, we need you to come in and work the 4 a.m. shift on the drive-through." There's not a lot you could do about that, right? So, really, we just want to help more people have stability and creativity in their work, and I think learning the code is probably the best thing you can do if you want those things. So, yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. We've got a couple folks saying in the chat, essentially, Quincy, thank you so much for Free Code Camp. Thank you for sharing, folks. And this is what we want, folks. So let me just highlight that in the chat. Any questions that you might have about perfectionism, learning web skills, or tech in general, like we've got these folks here, and the objective is to have them, chat with all of you, answer your questions, and just sort of what I love about these things is that they're sort of a reminder that we're all human beings trying our best, and that we all go through these bumps. Like, Joe, you put it so magnificently in your talk. So I'm actually don't have any questions. We're going right in. We got folks already asking. And I'm going to let anybody speak up as they go. I'm going to give everybody a chance to respond here on the panel. My job here is just going to be to sort of like control the flow of questions and all of that, and keep an eye on them as they come in. So the first one is from Volunteer Pair asking, question: how should we react to criticism and feedback? And I'm curious if anybody wants to give that a go.
We've heard a lot of my voice already, so if the other two want to jump in, I'm happy. Otherwise, I have thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, and I'm in a pretty privileged position in that, like, I don't feel like I have to like go out there and like prove myself over and over every single day. For me, it's just great to hear somebody coming back with hopefully constructive criticism that I can act upon, because it's so easy to like just read through like a tutorial that somebody wrote, or look at a website and say like, oh, this looks kind of janky when I look at it on this device. Like, they really should fix that. But then they don't actually tell you, and you're totally oblivious to the fact that this is something that needs to be improved. Right. So my first reaction is, of course, like sometimes like, oh, damn, did I really forget to like do that thing? Or did I really make that mistake? But I try to quickly correct, like, oh, okay, great. Like, now that I know that this problem exists, assuming it's a problem and it's not like an intentional design decision or something, like, awesome. Like, this is going to be so much better for all the other people in the future who visit this website or read this tutorial or something. So, I mean, like, my immediate reaction after I get over the totally natural and like probably unavoidable like reflexive defensive feeling that one might feel is awesome. Like let's go and improve this, and let's see if this criticism is worth acting upon. And even if it isn't, I will thank them. I'll be thanks for the feedback on that. Because I want to encourage more people to give me feedback. And if you shoot the messenger, you're going to find that you're not getting a lot of messages, right? So that would be my feedback, is like, see if you can just like reframe it as like, oh, like this is useful information. Like I hadn't thought of this, or, see if you can do something productive with that feedback. And, being defensive, again, it's totally normal. I think everybody feels defensive when people critique them, but it's not really that helpful to feel defensive. It's kind of like one of those emotional reactions that probably has some like evolutionary roots, but in present day doesn't really serve, in a lot of situations when you're just getting feedback from people. That, again, that's my personal opinion. Your mileage may vary. Dhawal?
Yeah, I mean, both Quincy and I come from a place where we have a website, so we're thinking about feedback, we're thinking about strangers. And, like in that case, like I actually appreciate it because it's like, oh, finally somebody cares about us. Because how many websites do we use every day? How many sites we visit? And how many times we have actually sent someone an email or like contacted the creators to say like, hey, so you can see your analytics, you can see people using it, but many cases you don't actually, interact with your users on a directly basis. So in a way, like, feedback sometimes is a way like, oh, finally, we are worth somebody's time to write, get over their social anxiety and fill up a form or write an email. So sometimes it can be like, a good thing.
One thing I would like to add is, especially for those of us who are neurodivergent, and those of us who have ADHD, there can be a real connection between receiving criticism and feeling like that's a rejection. So there's something called rejection sensitivity disorder, when even receiving, any kind of feedback, it can feel, you can really get in your feels about it, and it can feel like it's a criticism of you as a human rather than a criticism of your work, or the work that you did that day, not even your work in general. And so what I would suggest is that you try and separate feedback and criticism on your work from feedback and criticism on you as a human being who is capable of working or not working. And try and just make sure you take a step back. So if you do feel that immediate, like, oh my goodness, this person thinks that I can't do my job, this person hates what I've done, this person thinks that I'm not perfect, try and just, take a step back from it and think, okay, this person, like you mentioned, this person actually cares enough to give me feedback, and this person wants to help me improve. I'm going to read through what they've said with a critical mind, make sure that, I agree with what they've said or not. And this is an opportunity for me to learn. This is an opportunity for me to improve. And this is a good thing. But I know it's really difficult. Ramon and I were having a conversation the other day because I received some feedback on some of my work and it made me cry. But then, I was happy and thankful that somebody had taken the time to spot something that I'd done wrong. So if you do have that immediate sort of very negative reaction, just accept it, but then try and move forward from it.
Thank you all so much. And this whole time I've also been thinking about like how important the distinction that Bill and Tad Pair made here of saying criticism and feedback, because they are kind of different things,
Yeah.
right? And I think my reaction to criticism, I will admit, is quite, I don't know if the term is visceral. I very quickly need to fix it now. Like now, I gotta fix it, and then process it. I don't know if that happens to anybody. It's like, let me do the, like, let me get rid of the bad image first and then process the feedback, right? Because it is like, it's interesting. I want to give Jess the chance to answer two, I'm gonna bring you on. Is that cool with you, Jess? Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
gosh, there's
Jess.
tons of us. So how should we? I was actually going to take Joe's answer and say cry. Uh,
Just have a good old cry.
I mean, like, because most of the criticism these days, a lot of people are working remotely. It lives on the internet. You could just go in the other room and have a cry. But I think at this point that the discerning between criticism and feedback is really useful, but also when it's useful and when it's not. So if somebody came by and left a comment on your website, it's like, this website sucks, I'd be like, okay, you don't even have to respond to that. Whatever is going on with that person probably doesn't have anything to do with your website. And it probably just sucks to suck. They're going to be like that all day, and you're going to go have a nice little cup of tea. One thing I really like to suggest to people is a cup of tea break. And if you don't drink tea, fine. You can make a little fancy coffee. You can go have a snack. You can go pet a dog. But a roughly 2-minute or longer break when you get anytime you get feedback where you're really emotional to it, instead of responding right now or even making a decision about what you want to do right now, go and walk away from the computer or go and I mean, you can't always just walk out of a meeting. And maybe if you're the boss of your own project. But if you can get a little bit of a break, and if you're still not sure if the feedback or criticism is weird, show it to a trusted friend to be like, "Hey, is this a real thing? Somebody said my voice sounds weird and I should stop teaching." And obviously, no one did that. I would fight them.
I would
But
fight them.
say, "Oh, cool." And it's the same kind of people get taught before you criticize something. Oh, is it useful? Is it kind? Is it necessary? But you could do the exact same thing when you're looking at feedback. Somebody says, "Hey, your website sucks." You'll be like, "Well, it's not useful. It's not especially nice. And I didn't need this. I'm just going to put this in the bin and go have a really laid back." Sometimes you don't have to respond to it. And I think that's marvelously freeing. Obviously, have a little bit of a ponder. Hey, does my website suck? And for me, almost always yes. But it's yours. It can suck as much as you want it to. I'm going to go hide again. Not cry, not cry.
I was gonna add to that if I may. Like if you do get that feedback that is not helpful, try your best to lose the link. Don't keep it somewhere so you can go and make yourself feel bad later. Just putting it out there in case you're like me and you make bad decisions. Anyway, thank you all. This has been wonderful. Let's bring up the next question from Dominica, who's asking question. What do you all think about the pixel perfect thing they often state in job descriptions? Figma to web, pixel perfect layouts. I'd love to get some thoughts from y'all.
I think it's so that the designers don't get mad. So
Yeah, pixel perfect is usually a design focused thing rather than a development focused thing. I would assume if I saw pixel perfect that it was we're expecting you to do some UI design as well as some UI development. And if they're asking for pixel perfect in UI development, then I would maybe go back to them and say, do you understand what responsive web development actually is? Because you ain't getting pixel perfect because people have different size screens. So, don't be afraid to ask in interviews and when you're applying for jobs, like what they meant when they say things like that on job descriptions. Because quite often they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, thank you all. I will bring up our next question from Matthew, who's asking, how can we ensure we're doing a project that is worthy of sharing to show that we have the relevant skills for a job or apprenticeship?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. If I can jump in, so
Please.
I mean, my philosophy when I coach people for applying for jobs and things like that is it's much better to have like a single really impressive project that incorporates a whole lot of different things than just have like a huge smorgasbord of different projects you built that an employer or hiring manager may not have time to actually go through and look at all the different things. Like it's cool to just be able to say, hey, I built this really big thing and people use it, and you can check out all the different functionality in it, or just bullet point it out, or record like a quick demo video of it. But I would say, like, if it's for employers, that's one thing. If it's for just feeling forward momentum with your skills and sharing it, social media is great in the sense that, like, it's not great for a lot of reasons, but it's great for this very specific thing, which is you can take a project you built, you can share it, and if people don't like care, no big deal. If people scroll past it. If some people see it and they give you constructive feedback, like, oh, this is really good, like, have you thought about adding this or doing this, or like, oh, like that color contrast is kind of like not sufficient, like you might consider, making it a little easier on the eyes, things like that. Like, my humble advice would be, if you build something and you spent time on it and you're like, yeah, I'm going to put it out there, like, just putting things out there shows that you are getting things done, right? There's a lot of merit to people who just show up. Showing up is half of the battle, as they say, right? Or yeah. And by publishing things, even if they're things that you're like, hey, this is kind of rough, but here you go. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever published something on, like, really anywhere and said, oh, this is not even totally ready yet, or like, this is kind of rough, right? Like, feel free to use that term, because it's okay to realize that things aren't perfect when you're shipping them, because, if everything were perfect, nothing, whatever ship. I mean, even on, like, the Apollo missions, like, they had problems with the lunar lander, right? They had, like, bugs that were like, they're trying to land on the moon and they're like having to manually do it in the darkness because they're code problems, right? So if they couldn't get it right for that, anyway, yeah, just that would be my humble advice. Is, like, don't feel bashful about sharing something. If it is for work related, then it's kind of a completely different conversation, in my humble opinion, than if you're just trying to show forward momentum and get things out the door.
Yeah, I mean, I started Class Central sort of a way to, like, be like a project or a GitHub project that I can show off, right? So I think originality also helps. Like, maybe you don't have to have the most complex, React app, but if you have something original and you can show off other skills, I think you don't have to purely compete on, like, the best code, or, I think software engineering is more complex than, um, you sometimes spend more time figuring out, how to solve it than actually solving it. And, and there's, like, too many things you need to consider. So if you can demonstrate that, like, I think that might be a better opportunity for you to stand out against the rest of the people who are applying.
Yeah, I'd say first of all, have a think about the word worthy there. Like, you can share anything that you want to, as done or undone as you want. People have zero right to tell you whether or not it's worthy to share. You share what you want. As far as showing that you have relevant skills for a job or apprenticeship, make sure that you're looking at what's on the job description, what they're asking for, and that the project that you're sharing shows the things that they're asking for. It really is kind of that simple.
Thank you all so much. And I think that's pretty in line with how I feel as well. How about you, Jess? Do you have some thoughts on this? Yeah. Let's bring you in.
Sorry, I was holding a cat. It looks a bit more like a hand, isn't it? So I'm gonna softly disagree. I'm gonna softly disagree with some of you, but mixing stuff in. So, it's better. It is better to have a really, really good project. And this is kind of coming into what somebody else is asking later on. So I'll spoil this answer. But if you're just getting started, especially, I, again, would lovingly push folks to show me messy, imperfect, ugly stuff. And so GitHub is sort of, I used to call it Instagram. I used to call it Flickr for code. And these days, Instagram for code. I recently said, oh, it's like Flickr for code, talking to people in person. And the absolute Flickr was like an old Instagram for old people before phone. So GitHub is where your code can live. Put everything on there. Put all sorts of weird projects. But when you're talking about a portfolio site or stuff you include in your resume or CV, in that case, yeah, maybe go ahead and pick the top 3 coolest things you did or the top 5. But until you have a bunch of things that you've done that you like, go ahead and just show me all of them. I'm going to remove myself again so I can remove a cat from the room.
Thank you so much, Jess. I want and to that note, what Jess was highlighting was this question here from Hannah. What about your portfolio that you present to a potential employer? Do you think it's okay to include imperfect sites in this case? And we've kind of covered this already, but I wanted to see if y'all had any additional thoughts on that.
I mean, as an employer, I want to see the stuff that you're working on for funsies. Like, I want to see that you're interested in technology in general, not that you're only making pixel perfect sites. You know, I want to see what projects you're up to. So absolutely put imperfect sites, put unfinished things on that, you know, just happen to have a particularly interesting piece of UI or a particularly interesting framework that you were just testing out. Like, I want to know that you're interested and that you're interesting, basically.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is you could just include like a roadmap of different things that you eventually would like to get to with the project. So that way the employer knows, like, you're kind of addressing right up front, like, hey, I don't expect you to get the impression this is a perfect project. Like, they're like, go in and tighten up the UI and do all if you kind of list those out, then that kind of inoculates the reviewer of the project from, it kind of disarms them from being able to have those thoughts come in on their own, and it kind of shows that you are thinking both tactically, like, okay, if I have time to come back to this project, because let's not delude ourselves, there are like tons of great ideas out there. We have so many different things we could be spending our scarce time building, and it may not be worth the time to go back and refine that. But I would just be like forthcoming with the employer if you include a project that you would not consider finished. Just be very candid that this isn't finished. This is just to demonstrate a particular thing that I'm interested in, for example. That would be my personal approach.
And also, like, imperfect also means that, you know, it's at least you who did it. I think with so much stuff available on the internet, sometimes it's hard to determine if you know, actually, you know, if the project you are showcasing is something that you actually built it. So something original and something that's, you know, however you define imperfect, it's you know, I feel like sometimes it makes it more like easier for, you know, to know that this person did it and is, you know, has put some thought into it, as opposed to just sort of, you know, checking out somebody else's project and presenting it as yourself, or, like, you know, just making some tweaks to the text or something. So I think imperfect is also, I at least, you know, good, but from my perspective, is like, yeah, you started something original right from scratch, and I think that's what you would want to see, like, especially in the remote world, you want to see independence, as you know.
Awesome, thank you. And I want to combo this with a question that Boogie Pop had, which is that what about people who don't have previous experience? Can we include projects can we include projects like what we built from Free Code Camp, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. You could include those. I would just be candid, like, that that it's a free cooking project, because there's a good chance that if the employer or the recruiter or the person reviewing it may be like, hey, this looks very similar to this other project that a person submitted. So if you're candid about that, then I think that kind of like preempts any apprehension they may have about you based on, like, the fact that your project's so similar to others. But I mean, my humble advice would be take some of those free code camp projects that you built and see if you can just build a whole bunch of additional features on it and just pile other stuff on it. And eventually it will not even resemble what the scaffolding that we may have given you in the free code camp project. And you'll have something that's, you know, all your own, because I really think that showing something that is kind of that you've really taken and built up yourself, especially if you can get people actually using it and giving you feedback. You're gonna build something that's a lot more compelling than just kind of those stock off the shelf project. It's the difference between going into like Macy's and getting like a suit off the rack and getting like a designer tailored suit. Not that I know anything about suits. I don't know why I'm using that analogy. I haven't worn a suit in like
I
5
like
years
I
or
like
something.
the buying a bag and then putting a million fun pins on it. Like, you make it your own.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
There's a comment from Mitch there that says that they were told by a developer to show interest and excitement about specific web technologies, and that's exactly what employers are looking for, especially if they're hiring a junior role. We know that you're not going to have years of experience under your belt, but we want to know that you are interested and excited about specific things, that you have been doing some learning. And so, yeah, if you have got projects that you did during boot camps or during your own online learning, absolutely share them, be honest about them, being things that, you've done through learning. But we want to see that you care about learning. That's the important thing.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for contributing, folks. We got a lot of questions here. I'm gonna try and get some more in because I know I want to be respectful of y'all's time, and y'all are being so kind to share with us. Here's a great question, I think, from Mokoto. Some of my earlier giving up on perfectionism happened in intro coding and hard math classes in uni when I was one of the 2 girls and I didn't feel like an environment where you could ask questions. How do you handle being vulnerable / not perfect in front of peers that pretend to be?
I mean, nobody's perfect. You can just basically say like, okay, it's cool. Like that's their thing. Like a lot of people want to come across as like very polished and smooth and like they've anticipated everything. I mean, that's just not my style personally. like it may work for some people, and it may work in some kind of cultures better than others. For the kind of like North American software developer scene, I've found that like a vast majority of people I meet are much more interested in learning and getting better than seeming like eminently confident. And as such, they're not going to pretend to be perfect, or they're going to be looking for positive, for feedback, ways they can improve further. Right? They're not playing to win; they're playing to get better.
Yeah, I guess this ties into like a bit of imposter syndrome too. So, yeah, I don't have any strategies how to get over it, but it feels like, yeah.
It can be super difficult, especially when you are the minority in the room. I did an engineering degree, and I was, I think, 1 in 10 women to men. And yeah, it can be really difficult. I think the thing that's super important is to talk about it with the people around you, because I think you'd be surprised by how many people around you are feeling the same way. Like, I mean, put a hand up in the chat if you've ever felt imposter syndrome. I'm gonna take we guess that it's gonna be the majority of us, and the majority of us have felt like we don't belong, that we're not as good as everyone around us. But if you talk to other people about it, you'll find out everybody feels that way, and then that suddenly sort of breaks that barrier to being allowed to ask questions and being able to ask questions. And I also find that being the one who asks the questions kind of breaks the barrier of, sometimes it feels like there's this sort of invisible barrier where everybody knows what everybody's talking about. And if you're the one who goes, you said that acronym and I don't know what that is, a lot of other people in the room also go, oh God, we didn't know what that was either. Thank you so much for asking. You will be surprised how many people don't know what everybody is thinking about and just stay quiet about it, and how much they will be so appreciative of you asking the questions. So I know it's really difficult to be vulnerable, and I get it, and I get that I'm in a privileged position of having many years under my belt and being able to be like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. But try and remember that you're also the champion of a bunch of other people who also don't know, and that might give you that extra bit of confidence.
Yeah, that's something that I've sort of, as I've gotten some experience with time and felt more comfortable doing so, is trying to, given that I have that position of privilege, is to try and ask the questions always, just sort of like eliminate that whole potential of like everybody being like, oh good, like none of us knew, so like let's all get on the same page. I'll just ask, even if I look like, I look silly for a moment because I asked what, I don't know, SEO is, search engine optimization. Somebody used that acronym. I was like, hey, I mean, even if I knew, I was like, hey, what does that stand for? Like, give them the opportunity to put it into their own words as well. And that's something that I find I can do to at least give an example that even somebody who's I've been at this for a good while, I'll not know things as well. If we knew everything by heart, we wouldn't have documentation, right? On that note, thank you all. I don't know if anybody wanted to add something to that. Cool. I want to highlight a question here from Linda, who's asking, I'm asking for an honest questions. What are the odds of getting a first employer in web dev or software engineering for older people who are female? FYI, I can take constructive truth. And I wanted to know if anybody had some thoughts on this.
I can jump in again. It is, in being truthful, it is going to be more difficult. You will be interviewed by people who aren't the same as you and will make assumptions about you, and so you will have to have a thicker skin. But that doesn't mean that you're in any way unqualified or in any way unable to do the job. Like, keep applying, keep putting yourself out there. I know it is going to be a tough road. I would, from my personal experience, startups have a tendency to hire the younger folks. The larger companies have a tendency to hire folks who are, a further on point in their life. So you might find it easier to find a job with the larger companies. That's their bias and nothing to do, again, with how able you are to successfully do that job. My personal experience. I don't know if the others have had a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say ageism is real, sexism is real. Like, these are going to be things that, additional things that you're going to have to power through. But I know lots of women in their 40s, 50s who are getting jobs in as developers, and it can certainly be done. And if you, my humble advice would be just to find people who've done it and, see if they have any tips. You can just follow people on Twitter. You can find people on LinkedIn. There may be, like, specifically for older women, there may be some subreddits or some other communities that you can join and just find a peer group there. But I'll say you got this. If you put in the time and energy, and if you keep applying, for everybody, even for people who specifically study computer science and are recent college graduates and all this, they still have to apply to a lot of jobs. Just the nature of software, like, employers are very risk averse, and it's very expensive for them to hire the wrong person and have to, like, train them and then replace them 6 months later. So as a result, the entire industry is incredibly risk averse, at least here in the United States, where it's costly to bring somebody on and let them go and provide unemployment benefits and do all that. I do talk a little bit about this in my book, which is free. I'm not plugging like a paid book. It's just, if you just search learn to code and get a developer job. I talk a little bit about strategies for finding that kind of like peer group and approach, like attitudes for approaching the very arduous, um, ambiguous process of applying for jobs. But don't let yourself get discouraged, because it absolutely can be done.
So sorry, I was just grabbing the link to your book and posted it into the chat, folks. If you want to check it out, I have highlighted it here. Oh, hold on, there we go. I have highlighted it here. So please go check it out. Thank you. Really appreciate everybody, and this is something I struggle with personally a lot, because I want to encourage folks to keep going, but I think it's important to also be realistic. Getting that first job, that first tech role is already difficult, more difficult than we give it credit for. So I think I'm thankful to you all for being so upfront about it. Cool. Got a couple more questions. Let me bring one up from Alex, who's asking, a question I had is tips for breaking away from relying on tutorials as a perfectionist. Tutorials will take me from point A to point Z, and I feel like I'm learning and producing this perfect project. And I feel like I've definitely been there in some respects, and some people have called it something like the tutorial swamp, where you get stuck in it. I wanted to get some thoughts from all of you. Do you have any tips for this?
Yeah, I think you have to work on your own ideas or own, imperfect project, or, just so that it's easy to follow along and get that self-confidence. And sometimes you have to do it, get your hands in before, So, just also try to read documentation, then you kind of realize what you don't know. So I think MDN is like a good source, right? Like if you look at some other websites which give you the answer quickly, but you kind of don't learn anything. And MDN on the other hand, tells you a lot of, you kind of get you might not understand it on the first read or the first 10 reads, but at least it gives you a path to grow out of that, go to the next level. So
I'd say one of the things that really helped me to sort of break out of that, the safety of the tutorial phase and into the, okay, I'm going out here on my own and I'm going to make something, is to make something that you care about, that you're excited about. If you're really into knitting, for example, maybe make a website that will help you pick colors for your next knitting pattern. Or if you're really into baking, make a website where you can show photos of all of your cakes. Make something that makes you excited and that makes you want to actually work on the thing. And that makes a huge difference to how much energy you have when you're working on it.
Yeah, and I would just say projects. Like if you're doing a lot of tutorials that are kind of independent of projects, like getting started with React type, like reading it and coding along at home, that's great. Once you're done with that, take that kind of boilerplate that you've just built as part of that tutorial and keep building upon it and come up with some ideas for how you can take it in a direction. Make a website focused on knitting. Make some sort of interactive knitting simulator where you're like weaving with needles or something. That'd be like a really cool kind of like canvas and JavaScript exercise. But figure out some way to keep going with that project and have fun with it. And I think that's the real path out of tutorial hell, is instead of doing the same introductory tutorials over and over, just have a project and continue to expand and bring more and more tools into it. And as Joe said, passion about the actual subject matter will carry you in the points of when you're really frustrated, you're like, but I really like knitting, so I'm going to keep going.
So there's a really excellent video by the folks over at Global Diversity CFP Day on how to come up with ideas for technical talks, but I think it can also apply for project ideas. So like Laura there has said that coming up with project ideas is their kryptonite. I'll find the link and I'll share it in the chat. But basically they make you come up with a bunch of ideas. So what are you passionate about? What are you learning at the moment? What really makes you mad that you really want to see improved? And it comes up with a whole load of questions to ask yourself when you're trying to come up with a new project. And then, you can write them down and maybe something will come out of it. Let me find the link right now.
I should have them here, Joe. It is the CFP advice one, right? Crafting your biography, the perfect tech talk. I think
Tech
it's
Talk, I think is the. Oh no, wait, that's the one by Saran.
that's
right?
the one from Saran. I mean, they're all really good.
It's the one where there's two of them having a chat about how to come up with a topic.
Yep. It's Sarah May and Raquel Velez. That's the one.
Yes,
I will
that's the
post it
one.
in. That is an excellent video. Thank you for highlighting that. And I wanted to add something as well, if I may, which is that I think, and I love what you were saying, Quincy, about like going from there. And my problem is that I will oftentimes get overwhelmed by imagination. Like, what do I add? So I just try to go like very, very, very modular and perhaps silly. What if instead of red, I make this blue? And like already then I'm like sort of breaking out, and I might break stuff. I love, like, for me, when I break something, it's kind of like, okay, this seems overwhelming. I'll just take a step back, see if I can fix it, and just go from there. And that really helps me break out of it. It sort of like leads me to documentation. One piece of advice I learned from her name is Queen Arit. She said something like, once you're able to start working on things without relying on tutorials, but rather on documentation, that's when you're ready to start applying to stuff. And that really stuck with me, and found something I found really helpful. So thank you all. Let's see. I think we got time for 2 more questions. Let me see here. Ooh, okay. I'm gonna bring up a question from Linda, who's asking, where should I post my work? What do we think?
I feel like that's a difficult question now that Twitter has imploded upon itself.
I mean, for what it's worth, like, you can still post it on Twitter if you got followers there. The main place I would try to post is places where you think people that you know are going to see it and be likely to give you feedback. One place you could do that, of course, is the FreeCodeCamp forum. We have a section called Project Feedback. And if you post your project there, usually within a few hours, you'll get some feedback. And, a lot of it will be very, like, detail oriented, like, oh, I noticed that this image was broken or something like that. But, like, you can certainly say, like, oh, awesome, thanks for that feedback. What else do you can, like, kind of like, can you give me some more? There are plenty of people, and these are just volunteers who make time out of their day to go there and give people feedback on their project, and kind of not only to give them specific technical things, but also the inspirational boost that people get from, like, knowing other people are seeing your work. Like, I mean, I don't use Facebook personally, but if you have a lot of friends or family that are on Facebook and it's the middle of the day, like, it doesn't hurt to just throw your project there, like, hey, what do you all think of this? But just be aware that, like, depending on the level of, I guess, sophistication, specifically around the tools and techniques you're using and stuff, people may just say, like, oh, it looks great. Like, they may give you very general things. So it is definitely best to, like, put it in front of other developers or designers if you want to get, I guess, more actionable feedback, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Someone in the chat has mentioned CodePen, which is a really great place to share your work. And I'd also say, don't forget LinkedIn. That's a great place to get feedback. And if you are using particular technologies, so if you're using, React or Svelte or Vue or Next, each of these technologies have their own Discord forums as well, where you can post and ask questions of experts and, share your work. They love to see that you're using their technologies. So definitely post in there as well.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Let's go into our final question. which is a little bit less related to perfection and bad websites. Got a question here from Alex, who's asking, what are your thoughts on AI replacing some web developer jobs? Maybe somebody has a take here.
I definitely have a take. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I've been using Copilot. I absolutely adore Copilot. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It makes the boring parts of web development, the repetitive parts, much easier, much faster, much more pleasant. But it can't write my code for me. My partner is he's doing a lot of hiring at the moment, and one of the questions that he always asks his interviewees is to complete the diamond kata, which, if you don't know what that is, you get the console or whatever output you're using to output the letter A, and then the letter A followed by B space B, and then the letter A, and then A, B space B, C space 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 C, and you create a nice diamond shape out of all the letters of the alphabet. And so you give it a G, for example, and it should print out the diamond shape that goes all the way to G and back. And it's a nice kata to see how people work. And ChatGPT could not solve that kata. So it's not replacing any of us just yet, but it is a really useful tool to engineer away those really boring bits where you're like, oh, I can't remember how to, generate a random number between these two things, or I can't remember how to make myself a UID or something like that. That's my opinion. You may disagree.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
Dhawal, if you want to go first,
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think? Do you have any opinions on this?
It's it's templated, right? So if there is like a generic thing you're doing for SEO spam or like other those things, if you're actually building something that people use and voluntarily use and creates value, I think you should be fine. But if you are just like trying to for those who like don't know, SEO is like search engine optimization, and there's a whole shady world where people just build websites that only do well on Google, and I think those things are something that might get replaced maybe because you're not really targeting quality. So as long as you have some, you don't have to be perfect, but you need to also have some eye for quality, and I think you should be fine. And you can, as Joe said, you can use these tools to sort of do some of the grunt work, and especially with HTML, there's so many lines of code that you have to write. So I'm a backend developer, so I don't have to write so many lines of code as front-end developers do. So it can, save you some time and energy. So in a way, it can be in addition to what you're doing, not as a substitute. So
yeah, and that's my feeling is like GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, and a lot of these other tools are kind of productivity tools. I mean, if you understand how they work, and I'm not saying like I'm not like a computer scientist, and I haven't spent a lot of time like doing natural language processing and working with like large language models and things like that is driving most of the generative AI. One way to think of it is it's just like slightly more advanced, not slightly, quite a bit more advanced autocomplete, right? You still have to kind of like look at it and say, that's what I want to say right there, And so there's always going to be like, it may help bring developers into kind of a more declarative programming mindset. Like if what I always do, and I talk about this in my book because I'm a big, Trekkie, but it's kind of like the computer on the Starship Enterprise. You don't have to tell it exactly what to do. It's just like another layer of abstraction on top of a whole bunch of other stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to know where you're going, what you're trying to do. You're telling the computer what to do. You're managing the machine. And if the machine starts managing you, then maybe that's problematic. But yeah, like my humble advice would be like, don't hold your breath for it to dramatically impact the employment. Like maybe in 5 or 10 years, it will make individual developers so much more productive that the total number of developers necessary is to do a certain unit of work, however you want to abstract that, is smaller. But I'll tell you this, pretty much every company is trying to push everything into the software layer. Like there's so many different processes that are like, oh, this one person in this company knows what to do here, or like this spreadsheet, people refer to this spreadsheet and we update that. Like there's so many kind of like hodgepodge like processes and stuff like that, and that's where a lot of the development is happening. It's just people trying to make these things more standardized and efficient and transparent and testable and things like that. And that's where developers come in. And yeah, like the amount of jobs for developers is probably going to continue to do exactly the same thing it's been doing for the last 40 years. So I wouldn't be worried about developers being automated. Maybe some other jobs, but that wouldn't be being automated by tools like ChatGPT. It's going to be automated by developers. Developers are the ones who do the automating, and therefore it should be the last job that ever gets fully automated. That's kind of how I think of it. But I think everybody on this call can agree that like this is not like some existential threat to the field of software development. At best, it's a cool tool that we can leverage, and I love using these tools. Right, like pretty much everybody on our team uses Copilot, right? And they're going to help us a lot. And like I use it all the time to like, hey, change the variable names on this to like some other, like make them all thematic around sports or something like that. I don't know a lot about sports, but I want sports in this example, right? Like I'll give it code snippets and have it do things like that. And it saves me a lot of time and like kind of tedious thought that, use your brain for like really advanced, like high level strategizing and things like that, and leave a lot of the grunt work to the machine where possible. And that's one of the things that I think is really good. Anyway, I'm sorry for the long answer, but I just want to convey to everybody, like I'm very optimistic and excited about these technologies. I don't find them to be particularly threatening.
No, thank you. Please don't apologize. That was really helpful and motivating and invigorating. So I appreciate it a lot. It kind of reminded me, by these tools that will help us make it easier. I remember GitHub introduced a way to leverage Copilot to be used with your voice, making coding significantly more accessible for those who can't use a keyboard. And that I find tremendously empowering. And will be able to give us that, give folks the ability to give more work for developers to do. So I'm super excited. Thank you all so much. I think that's the last question for now. My camera it's vibrating a little bit to tell me it's like time's up. But I want to give you all a chance just to say something that we might have missed, something any parting words you wanted to share before we go for today. And once again, thank you so much. Happy to. Oh, sorry.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for creating the Bad Website Club. Like this is so cool, and I'm so happy that this exists. I guess my parting words would be: don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk about how you're feeling about everything that you're working on. Talk to Ramon. Talk to Jess. If you want, my DMs are open. I'm always happy to talk as well. And yeah, it's been lovely chatting to you all.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Enjoy the process. Like, just, what a time to be alive. What great, amazing people to be building these bad websites with. Right? I think you're going to have a lot of fun, and don't be daunted. Just dig in and really make the most of it.
From the bottom of my heart, everyone, thank you so much for being here, for answering our questions. I'm gonna slowly take us out of the stream, but Jess is gonna be hopping back in to sign us off and just say a couple more things. So I will say thank you once again, Jo, Dhawal, Quincy. You've all been incredible, and I can't thank you enough.
Sorry about that. We were both pushing the button at the same time. So this has been the sort of launch party for the Bad Website Club. Everything is, and for my own take about, oh, is AI going to take our jobs? It's 2023. The whole world is scary. Definitely there's stuff to be worried about, but AI is like way down on the list. So, like, what was it? There were giant wasps. The weather's doing weird things. So definitely be afraid of AI if you've got the energy to, but there's a lot more exciting things to be afraid of in the meantime. What you don't get to be afraid of, because it can't hurt you, is learning these. If you heard a loud sound, that was one of my cats learning a very, very useful lesson about heights. He's fine, just very embarrassed. The one thing you're not allowed to be afraid of is, I mean, do be afraid of falling from a great height, obviously, but building these websites together. So we're gonna come back just a little bit, just a little bit later than it is right now, next week, and we're gonna hear from the folks from Wix on Monday. They're gonna give us a very professional look at here's how Wix builds websites. Yeah. And then on Tuesday, Ramon and I are going to do a very bad job building a very bad website with what we've just learned badly. And you said, well, actually, I'm a web developer. I don't need no code tools. I said, wait, hold on. Sometimes you're in a hurry. Like if your aunt has just opened a bakery and she said, oh, will you make me a website? You'd be like, oh, yeah, my aunt who always gives me socks wants me to make a website. I'll do that. And you just pull out one of these no code, low code tools and you get it done in a quick, hot second. It's going to be very, very laid back, very relaxed. And in the meantime, I would gently enjoin you to have the most relaxing middle of the night, morning, or afternoon possible. Thank you all very, very much. And I'll see many of you next week. I've got somebody saying they want to see what's on my bookshelf. It's just comics. I'm going to sign off to go read comics, and I will see many of you. No pressure. You can always catch the replay next week, right around this time. Thank you all so much.